Ashe, Ashe and Grand Rising, a grand day to you all. Once again, my fellow humans. And as customary, let me state clearly, Ashe and Grand Rising, a grand day to you all, my fellow natural, native, earthly humans, because now we have to distinguish between the human being, and the humankind, and the natural, native, earthly humans. And let me say welcome again, welcome back to part 8 of this, another of my thought-provoking presentation titled Retirement Plan for People 40 to 75. Another perspective, the Mystic Philosopher. And just to remind you, my people, yes, it is high time. It is high time for thinking. It is high time for reason and for reasoning. Now, if you haven't yet watched part 1 to part 7 of these talks thus far, I ask that you please do so before you continue to watch this part 8. By doing so, I'm sure you'll understand, you'll get more out of it. You'll get a clearer understanding, and overstanding of my perspective, then from which you can make your own judgment and conclusion. Now, some of you, my regular listeners, have texted me to inquire as to why I am late with this part 8. Some of you have even jokingly asked if I ran out of things to talk about. So let me address the last part of the inquiry first. No, I have not run out of, as they would say, lyrics. I don't write lyrics. Trutics or things to say. No, I haven't run out. I think I have so much to say. And I also know that I don't have enough time to say it all, or to say them all. I think I have a perspective on almost everything, if not everything. The reason why I am late putting out this part 8 is because my body had been hacked with one of the system's alien viruses, and it temporarily overran my natural immune system, or even more correctly, it overwhelmed and disrupted my natural immune system for a few days. Possibly some of you may detect it in my voice. But I am more than happy to report that I am up and about, and will be firing, as the saying go, I will be firing on all cylinders shortly. Now, some of you, my very attentive listeners, would have no doubt noticed that at the end of part 7, I told you that I will continue in part 8 by asking this question. Listen carefully now. Are our children, our spouse, or members of our families / close relatives abandon us and refuse to take care of us when we are old, and especially if or when we are determined by them to be good for nothing, or to value nothing? And I also made the comment that I think that is a very interesting question, and the answer should be interesting as well. However, as I continue to read, you may notice as I continue to read the question, I quickly realized that it did not make much sense. As no doubt it doesn't make much sense right now. It did not make much sense then, and I quickly aborted the question and moved on. And at the end of the recording, when I revisited the question, I found out that the reason why it did not make much sense was because there was an error in just one word, which was at the beginning. In my notes, there was an error in just one word at the beginning, and the word is are. Should be starting the sentence like that, are. The correct word should be can. So please let me continue the trend of thought as promised by now asking the correct question. And the intended question was and is this: can our children, our spouse, our members of our families, close relatives, abandon us and refuse to take care of us when we are old, and especially if or when we are determined by them to be good for nothing or value nothing? And if your answer is no, if you answer no, meaning they are not allowed to abandon us, then the follow-up question is, why not? Why aren't they allowed to abandon us? Or why should they not be allowed to abandon us, especially if or when we become useless and a nuisance, aka a burden to them? And if the answer is yes, meaning they are allowed, then the follow-up question is this: who or what would make them obligated to take care of us? I think that those are some very interesting questions to begin with. And the answers and discussions that it or they might evoke, I also think should and will be interesting as well. Now, please let me also hasten to point out here that the main focus in this talk will be on our children. From my perspective, our children, or if you prefer, our offspring, our families and our spouses are not, and for the lack of possibly a better or a more appropriate word that will qualify the word obligated, I use necessary. They are not necessarily obligated, and possible not naturally obligated, if at all obligated, to take care of us if or when we are old, or if or when we should live long enough to become old, just because we are their parent, just because we gave birth to them, just because we provided for them and raised them, etc. Just because they are our spouse, or just because they are our family or bloodline. And the reason why I think that they are not necessarily obligated, and possible not naturally obligated, if at all obligated, to take care of us if or when we are old, or if or when we should live long enough to become old, I shall elaborate on that and those points shortly. Now, some of our children or offspring may only, or some people may only do so or choose to do so out of their good conscience. Some may do so out of ethics, some out of morality or sympathy, out of empathy or pride, out of legal, religious, or political reasons, or some may do so just simply to be on our will and to inherit what we may have to die and leave for them, or possible for other known or unknown motives. Sorry. However, from my perspective, our children, our offspring, are not necessarily obligated. And it is also possible that they are not naturally obligated, if at all obligated, to take care of us when we are old, or should we live long enough to become old and disabled just because we are their parents? Now, I know it sounds heartless and insensitive, especially coming from a senior, a retiree myself. But just ask yourselves this question. How many of us have ever really given this question, this very sensitive topic, or this crucial subject of our children or of our offspring's obligation or responsibility, or our children non-obligation or non-responsibility towards us, their parents, serious thought or serious contemplation? How many of us have done so? How many of us have ever looked very deeply into this matter and examined it from many different angles? How many of us have just taken this question or these possibilities for granted? But before I continue to make my point and delve deeper into it, and as controversial as it may be, or as controversial as it may turn out to be, please let me share with you the meaning and definition of the word obligate, the verb, obligated, the adjective, and obligation, the noun. Meaning, the word obligation, one, means to bind legally or morally, to constrain, meaning to compel or force someone to follow a particular course of action. And two, to commit something such as funds to meet an obligation, unquote. And that quote is taken from the Merriam-Webster's dictionary online. You know, I always like to refer to more than one dictionary. Another online English dictionary, namely vocabulary.com, gives the meaning and definition of the word obligated as follows, and I quote: caused by law or conscience to follow a certain course. All right, let me repeat that. Caused by law or conscience to follow a certain course, unquote. It also gives the following practical examples of how the word is and may be used, and I quote: obligated can mean that you have to do something because the law or the rules say that you do. For example, you are obligated to pay your taxes by April 15. It can also mean that you just feel like you need to do something because it's the right thing to do, or because you feel like you owe someone. You're obligated to go to your best friend's birthday party, even though you'd rather be out with your new boyfriend or girlfriend, unquote. Again, my interpretation of this is that obligation of any form, or to be obligated to do something or to do anything, is not a matter of choice. If I may add, favorable choice, I might add. Or it is not a matter of that which is called free will, but it is a matter of force, constraint, which can also be interpreted as a violation of our free will. If indeed free will does exist, and if our knowledge, understanding, and overstanding of it is at all correct. And what is free will? Free will, according to one online English dictionary, is defined as, and again I quote, ability of agents to make choices free from certain kinds of external constraints, unquote. Wikipedia, that was from Wikipedia. And according to Reddit.com, and I quote, the phrase free will means that we were created with minds with which we independently think, analyze, draw conclusions, and make choices. Unquote. Now, for your information, my listeners, my interpretation of these two definitions of free will by two separate dictionaries is that free will is independent of all obligations. To say it another way, free will is the opposite of obligations. And so again, I will submit that if either or both of these definitions of free will are true, then it also further proves my point that from my perspective, our children, our offspring, are not necessarily obligated. And it is also possible that they are not naturally obligated, if at all obligated, to take care of us when we are old, or should we live long enough to become old and disabled just because they are our children and we are their parent. But I will have much, much more to say on this point as I continue, so please stay tuned. Sorry. Now, in preparation, my preparation for this part 8, I became aware of the fact that there are some countries, some jurisdictions or states that have some very strict laws that are designed to force children to take care of their parents. However, as controversial as this may sound to some of you, my listeners, but from my perspective, if and when all things are seriously considered, and were truth to prevail, it should be the other way around. Meaning, there should be strict laws that are designed to force the government, the system, the slave masters and slave mistresses, the elites, to take care of us, to take care, to protect, and to provide in all the best possible ways for retirees, aka elderly. Because it is the government, it is the system, aka the slave masters and mistresses, that enslaved them and robbed them. In other words, it's enslaved us and robbed us of the best days of our lives. Just think about it for a moment. Or just think about it from my angle of observation, my people. After they robbed us of our youth, after they robbed us of the best days and nights of our lives, they robbed us of our health, of our energy, our intelligence, our creativity. Man, this thing is bothering me, man. Sorry. After they robbed us of everything for an average of, let's say, 45 to 50 years of our lives, during which time they also have us prepared our children at our own expense to fill our role in the labor force, in the forced labor, in the labor camp. Prepare our children to be the new serfs, which they disposed of, or rather, when they disposed of us. We have to prepare our children. We start them from kindergarten to fill in our place when they dispose of us. Then they retire us, aka redundant us, and put us out to what? Pasture. Remember? That's why I asked that you watch all previous presentations so you get the flow. They put us out to pasture when there is nothing left of us. And then they have the audacity to be forcing our children, who have not even yet realized the lies, and the games that are being played on them to come take care of us, who are what? The system's reject. Now, for example, countries such as Jamaica, Canada, and the United States of America, these are countries that have these laws that force that I'm aware of, that force children to take care of their parents or their elderly. In Jamaica, there is a law known as the Maintenance Act 2005, Act of 2005, arrangement of sections. And under Part 5, subtitled Obligation of Person Who Is Not a Minor, we have number 10, Obligation of Person to Support Parents. In the province of Ontario, Canada, there's also a law known as the Ontario Family Act law. And according to one prominent Canadian law firm named Mills and Mills, according to their website, and this law firm is based right here in Ontario, Canada as well, and I quote, Section 32 of Ontario's Family Law Act states that an adult child has an obligation to support his or her parent who is in need of support, provided the parent cared for or supported the child in the past and provided the child has the means to provide support, unquote. And also, in a number of states in the United States of America, there is a law known as the FINAL, a filial, I hope I pronounced that correct. It's spelled FILIAL, responsibility laws. And under the filial, this is not my language, please bear with me, responsibility laws, children are legally obligated to do so. In other words, under the filial laws, our children are forced by law to take care of their elderly parents. This I also interpret that if they refuse, then there could be severe consequences. You never know, they may end up doing jail time. For your information, the word filial, F-I-L, filial, by meaning and definition, is, and I quote, one, of or due from a son or a daughter, and two, respectful of the duties and attitudes of a son or daughter toward their parents, unquote. Now, in answering the question, can you refuse to care for your elderly parents? This is what a website called medicinenet.com has to say, and I quote, everyone is obligated to take care of their elderly parents. Yes, you can refuse to care for your elderly parents. However, filial responsibility laws obligate children to provide their parents with clothing, food, housing, and medical attention. In the United States, each state has its laws requiring children to take care of their elderly parents. In 30 states, an adult is liable for their own parents' care after they are unable to care for themselves. However, the statute establishing this filial obligation has never been implemented in 11 of these states. So depending on your living situation, you may or you may not be required to care for your old parents, unquote. And in response to the question, what are filial responsibility laws? This is also what is said, what the said website has to say, and I quote, Filial responsibility laws were enacted to guarantee that the elderly are cared for after they are unable to care for themselves. When old people are unable to care for themselves, their children must take care of them. Filial responsibilities are only found in 30 states, unquote. Now, I just established why I don't think the children should do that. It's the system that we slave our ass off should be doing that. Anyhow, now, before I share with you some of my perspectives and give you some of my reasons and my explanations as to why I think that our children, our offspring, our families, and our spouses are not, and again, for the lack of a possible better word, necessarily obligated, if at all obligated, to take care of us when we are old, or should we live to become old just because we are their parents, spouse, or family. Let me again quote from the medicinenet.com website the 7 reasons why someone would reject. According to them, the 7 reasons why someone would reject to care for their elderly parents. Number 1, financial crisis. Families who care for their loved ones spend an average of $140,000 a year. And this is US dollars, $140,000 a year. This is not the complete cost, but only the portion that Medicaid does not usually cover. This is a substantial sum of money for any family to take on. It is not an amount you can budget for either. And it is difficult to do so when your relationship with your aging parents is damaged. Number 2, second reason from the 7, lack of time. Everyone's schedules, occupations, and families are unique. Due to demanding jobs, it gets difficult for many to care for their aging parents. Caring for an aging parent requires time and money, which some individuals cannot afford. Difficult relationship with, next one, number 3, difficult relationship with parents. If you do not have a healthy connection with your parents and your mental health may suffer. When an aging parent requires care, they should be placed in the best possible circumstances. Living in a toxic environment may impact their overall health negatively. When determining who will care for your aging parents, you should consider your emotional and mental health. Number 4, your physical and mental health is affecting. Caring for another person takes a lot of time and energy. When you must give up hobbies or career that you enjoy to care for your parents, it can have an impact on your quality of life and your happiness. A bad influence on these 2 areas can have a substantial impact on your mental health. If caring for an older parent has a detrimental impact on your quality of life, you may need to examine other possibilities. Number 5, parents refuse help. If you have a terrible and stressful connection with your parent, it may be time to distance yourself from them. Despite your best efforts, some parents refuse your assistance. You might feel frustrated. Number 6, your family responsibilities. You may have your family to support, including your partner and children. There is frequently insufficient time, energy, or finances to adequately assist them while caring for elderly parents. And number 7, moving to a new location. This occurs more frequently than you may expect. It is not uncommon for family caregivers to reach retirement age and desire to relocate to a more temperate and economical location. When you move there, when you move, there may be no other family members to give care or to give care to. Unquote. Well, that was from a quote from the site. Again, I'm just noticing that I have run out of time for this, the time allotted for this section or this segment, and that I will have to continue in part, continue in part 9. So I ask that you please join me again in part 9 for the continuation of retirement plan for people 40 to 75, another perspective by yours truly, I, the Mystic Philosopher. And where and when I will continue, right where I'm leaving off here, right? And we'll continue to examine the question, can our children, our spouse, but I'm going to be mostly focusing on our children. But the question is, can our children, our spouse, our members of our families, our close relatives abandon us and refuse to take care of us when we are old, and especially if or when we are determined to be good for nothing or of little or no value? We value nothing. I think that it is going to get more interesting. So again, I ask that you please stay tuned. In the meantime and between time, in your becoming, my people, I will let you be more and much, much more, and not less, aka bless. I don't want you to be less. I intend for will for you be more. For I am the Mystic Philosopher. Ashe, 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 I say.